A big welcome, everyone. We really appreciate the time you've taken to spend on your Wednesday evening after mihi, to come and connect, share some good kai together, but also celebrate some amazing work that goes on in this space for Wāhine. So appreciate that, and we just, as athlete activist Billie Jean King says in her autobiography, equity is not a woman's issue, an LGBTQ plus issue, or a minority issue. It's an everyone's responsibility, and none of us is as strong as we are all together. And that kind of puts us together on this panel. The mihi you do is really empowering for Wāhine, and we can't wait to hear more about what you're doing. So before we dive in a little more about the questions, we'll give the opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves and give us some more info about yourself, but also what the mihi you do. So I'll start from the closest.
I'll stay sitting if that's all right. So I'm Nicky, and I actually work at North. I'm the regional planning manager there, so I write strategies and frameworks, and everybody else does the work. So it's a good gig. I've had quite an extensive volunteer career, if you like, and I'm going to talk about some of the hockey stuff tonight, but also in softball over probably close to 50 years now. So. And a lot of kind of reward that comes from that. So hopefully have a chance to talk to you about some of the experiences that I've had coaching masters.
I've been around Fusi Feaunati, so it's a rugby coach up there, but I think I'd like people to remember me as a good father and a great husband to my wife before I became a rugby coach. So, my journey through the women and girls space has been a very privileged one, because I get paid to do rugby, and through that the opportunities are only granted through the fact that we have women and girls who play the game to give me the opportunity to be involved. The other part for me is the development to high performance manager at Wellington Rugby. So my role is to design pathways where we can create the talent and identify the talent, and then bring them through on a pathway that legitimately gives them an opportunity in rugby, whether they're ambitious or just want to give the game a go. And as well as creating some safe spaces for our women and girls in the game as well.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Kristen, and I'm a Canadian, but living in New Zealand for 13 years. I came with a couple of children and a husband, and I got into the tech startup space here about 10 years ago, and so I'm on my third startup. My first was a company called Whipster, and my second was an investing platform called Hatch, which I exited and left that about 2 years ago. And then my latest one with my Hatch co-founder is Powersuit. And there's a longer story, so connect with me, let's have a wine, I'll tell you exactly how Hatch turned into Powersuit. And so I'd love to just share a little bit about what I do tonight and why I care so much about Wāhine and male allies. And I love sport, so that is something else. If you want to talk about any sport, I love them all. As a Canadian, I had to watch our ice hockey team, men's ice hockey team, lose yesterday to the Americans. So it was a little bit sad, but anyway, I do love sport. In particular, I love seeing the rise of women sport. Incredible. Just come back from Australia, they're pumping tons of money into it. Love seeing that, and would expect to see that here as well.
Kia ora koutou, no ko te rana toku tūpuna, ko o tākaro te awa e mahi nei aku māharahara, ko o te tahi toku kāinga, kei te whanganui ātara e noho ana. E mihi ana ki te hau kāinga o konei, ko te tiriti o Waitangi toku korowai, ko Josh Sprott toku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Josh, and I am from Otatahi, Christchurch, born and raised. It may say Leadership Development Advisor, NZ Defence Force, however, I've only been in that role for 5 weeks, so unlike Kristen, my story is quite short. It's a pleasure and very much a privilege to be invited here today. The reason why I moved to Te Whanganui Tara Wellington is to be with my lovely and loving partner, and the job was just a benefit of doing that. So grateful to be here, and hopefully I can share some stories, and also, just like you, listen to some amazing stories as well.
Well done. I appreciate that, guys. It's always nice to know the human before it is some of the mucking you do. So just as an FYI to the group, we're going to ask a couple of individual questions and we'll just kind of group question it, just so we can have a discussion, and we will open the floor for questions for everyone to dive on in for their own interest. But to start off with, we're going to go Fusi first. What's the reason you got into coaching the female game?
Yep. So I was one of those boys or men that was heavily involved in the men's game, and on a pathway to NPC rugby and Super Rugby and so forth. But there was a young lady by the name of Salika Winiota, who's a kind of figure in world rugby, and she lives up in Palmerston North. We had taken up the opportunity, and she would always nip at my heels about, would you come and do some coaching with a woman? And I said no. And she would ask again, and I said no, go away. So then she would continue to ask again, and I said, you need to go and ask your coaches, because it's very undermining of you to come talk to me when you haven't asked your coaches to come and ask me to come and help you. But it suddenly dawned on me that she wasn't asking me to come and coach her, she was asking for help. And so there was one element of how I got involved in the game. Then I went home one day and I said to my wife, I think I'm going to go and help the woman because they just might need a little bit of help. And she said, well, what does help look like? Are you just going to be one of those males that walks in there, does a delivery, walks out of there, and they got a little bit of rugby content, but that's not really what they're asking for. And the question she put to me at a dinner table was, what if your daughter said she wanted to play rugby? Are you happy with what's there at the moment? And I said, I don't know what's there. Well, then that's what your daughter's walking into. And so there were those two elements that came into it. The other one was, there was a bit of a blockage in terms of my opportunity to go through in the men's game, because they just contracted a professional coach to the men's side, so I had to wait a couple of years. So I thought I'd give it a go, and I would go and coach a woman and have a look at what they were doing. And yet, sure enough, it was a whole lot of very generic delivery that was based on, we're here, but we're not really here. It's just an opportunity while we're waiting another opportunity. But I was part of that process, and I remember quite vividly being one of those male coaches who would have a women's team that was attached to the club that I was involved with, and they would come over and say, the women have got training, okay, can you push them off to the corner there, the most unlit part of the field, make sure they're off the field in this amount of time because we're going to take up the room. And then it suddenly dawned on me that I was part of the process and I was part of the issue. The issue around the girls weren't crying out for help in terms of rugby content, they just wanted to be recognised and acknowledged for the fact that they were playing a sport that they wanted to be really good at. So then I went to the union and said, I'm going to pull out the men's game and I want to be involved in the women's game. So then I got the opportunity to work with our women. There's a lot of things that came to light through that opportunity. What came to light was they were very successful and they were very good, they were very talented. But they also were very intimate in terms of they were human beings with emotions and feelings. But they couldn't get that correlation between them and a male coach who stood at the front of the room or had the whistle around their neck that really didn't understand who they were as females. So quite often in our game now, if the questions ever asked, are there significant differences between coaching women and men? Yes, there is. And the differences are the obvious ones, the physical ones, but the biggest differences is that our women have a different way of interpreting or a different way of presenting emotional or feeling regarding our sport. Our sport's a brutal one. It's a physical contact sport. It's gladiatorial. It's based on whether you're the toughest or the roughest, or you've got the ability to do something that's comparative with how the men do it. The truth is the women do the same thing, but they do it in a very different way. They do it in their way. So what I learned through that process was there's the acknowledgement that our women have a right and they have a purpose in the game, but they don't have identity because we don't do enough work around helping them to know who they are as people, to then feel comfortable and confident to play the game. The second part was respecting the fact that they are rugby players, and so quite often we use the gender referencing of the women rugby players. They're actually rugby players, they're athletes. And then the other part was, what does it mean for them in terms of the whole infrastructure of the role that they play in sport, and in rugby in particular, which is still very much dominated by the male lens. They are very significant in the fabric of the makeup of New Zealand rugby when we have a look at what they're achieving on international stages. Manawatu in particular had a sevens team that had won 5 out of 7 national titles. And you would never know because they never paraded the trophy and they never celebrated the girls winning a national championship. But they brought more into the union in terms of silverware, some form of media coverage from New Zealand rugby than the men did. But yet the men were getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to play the game. So what we figured out in time was, we don't want equality, we want equity. We just want the ability to get acknowledged, get given the things that we need for us to be good. And the girls needed advocacy and they needed sponsorship to do that because they weren't being heard. The Salika would walk into the rugby union and she'll be like, oh, how come we get the hand-me-down jerseys from the men? They don't fit us, have a look, you know. Everybody knows the Salika, she's tiny. But she would be the voice that would go in and speak to the people that are making the decisions around it. But she wasn't being heard. So where I came into it was I figured that they weren't really after a rugby coach, they were just after somebody to open the door and provide the opportunity for them to be heard, to be seen, and then most of all, to be celebrated as part of our sport. So that's how I got into rugby, and that's where I am now. I never think of myself as a good or a great rugby coach. I just think of myself as a very lucky person who gets to work with some very, very talented young ladies, and very talented women in our game. But now my focus is a little bit different because I've done the coaching thing, and that's great. There is no professionalism in the women's game in rugby. You know, there's semi-professionalism, but there's so much emphasis on financial losses and financial models and balance sheets and profit and loss that the women are never going to get the opportunity to earn what the men are getting. But they still have the right to play our game and to enjoy it. So that's why I got into rugby in the women's game. I don't know if I'll go back to the men's game in any hurry. I do help schoolboy teams. I'm helping one of the local colleges. And I do enjoy that because it keeps me honest around the difference between the boys and the women, and the boys and the girls and the men and the women. And hopefully we can create a following that says that we're opening doors that maybe one day the woman can take over, or the woman can come through, or the woman can be fairly heard based on what's there. One of the issues we have in our game, it's not that we don't have enough women coaches, we don't have enough systems to support them to progress and advance through their knowledge and learning of the game to present it in a fair platform in comparison to the males. That's where we're at in the game. And once we can put those systems in place, then more of our women can come through. But that's me, and it's a great journey for me, but I'm very privileged. Without women and girls wanting to play our game, I don't have a job and I don't have the opportunity to talk to them.
And it sounds like from the person you described yourself previously when you were coaching the men's game to the way you coach now, or the way you perceive coaching the women's game, taking quite a lot of growth in that space. How has coaching women grown you as a coach?
It's grown me a lot. I mean, I question myself every day, have I done a great job? Have I really done service to the people who are relying on me to be good at what I'm doing so that they can feel confident, they can feel courageous, and they can feel safe in this particular forum or this space that we're working in. For me, there's still a lot that I don't know about what I need to know about women and girls. And as long as I have that open-minded growth mindset, I'm still exploring best practices to be able to support the women and girls in whatever capacity that might be. Whether it's a girl that just wants to learn how to catch a rugby ball for the first time, or a woman who's advanced through the grades and wants to wear the black jersey of New Zealand one day. But it's my job to be good at what I do because they're totally reliant on that support and that guidance and that sponsorship as well. And that's not just on the playing side of things. You know, being involved with a union that had the first female CEO of an NPC team was a very eye-opening experience. And to be able to see the way that she was treated or mistreated would probably be the most appropriate term. The lack of real support for someone where the welcome mat was artificially put out. That's something that I look at, and I'll never forget that experience, because she reached out quite a bit, and I played that sponsorship role of walking her through the door into a really, you know, Manawatu's a very strong, you know, it's middle-aged farming, you know, rural district, and the acceptance of a female to run their game, it really wasn't there. And that person now, I believe some of you may know who she is. She was a wonderful person, and she had great skills, but she was not allowed to be herself in applying those skills, which deemed to be better than the other applicants who'd gone through the process, right? But at the end of the day, the fair process didn't make it fair for her to be part of it. So what I've learned is I've gotten what I want to get out of rugby. How do I create the opportunity for our women and girls to get that same opportunity? And it's still a work in progress. It really is, because you know, you have a look at the men who come out of playing in All Black jerseys, and now some of them have realised the limitations of being able to coach in men's rugby, so they step into women's rugby now. You know, you see a number of them, like people like Carlos Spencer, who helped coach the Super Blues team, and you know, other guys have gone to be involved in the women's game. Really, is it genuine care and genuine wanting to be involved in women's rugby, or is it just that was the only opportunity presented themselves because the other side of it exhausted itself, right? But yet we don't open the same door for women to go the other way. Yeah. You know? So it's really interesting times, and I was just reading an article this morning from a bunch of mates who were having a real debate on it. You know, over in Australia, they had a Super Origin, State of Origin women's game, and the panel, the commentary panel, the panel were all females. And there's this thing around, you know, in the men's game, there's always a female commentator that's part of the panel, right? But there were no males as part of this commentary group. And my mates were going on about the fact, oh, well, why isn't there a male in theirs? But they always insist that there's a female in the men's one. You know, it's that type of narrative that just drives me crazy. I don't know that I can ever be a part of the solution to get it right one day, but certainly hope that I can offer an opportunity that somebody else may take over, and we've laid some foundations for them to go to it. But yeah, that's what I've learned from it. I don't know if I'm right. I still enjoy it. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you. I guess it's kind of moving up the age group with Nicky. So Nicky just spoke about her coaching in hockey in the masters space. What approach do you take to coaching women's masters athletes to get the best from them?
Yes, it's probably step up literally as well. But, I'll give you some context first. So, perception of masters is kind of hit and giggle. But this is not what this is about. So masters hockey is the fastest growing part of hockey in New Zealand. So there's a national tournament every year. One this year was in Wellington. There were 99 teams from around the country, men's and women's teams that competed. And there's a full-on international program, which is overseen by the International Hockey Federation. So every 2 years there's a World Cup, and in New Zealand every other year there's a Trans-Tasman tournament, which is played on a home and away basis against Australia. So it's pretty full-on, so it's not rock up with your mates and run on a hockey field for a while. It's pretty serious, and so there are selections that get made at national tournament for New Zealand teams that go on to compete. And so I've been very fortunate to be a coach of a New Zealand Masters team since about 2012. I've followed the age groups through, starting at 40, now I'm up to 50. We've got a World Cup in November in Auckland, and we're playing 10 teams, so teams from Chile, Argentina, the Netherlands, Australia, USA, Canada, England, Ireland, Netherlands, so it's going to be pretty exciting. The approach that I take, the first thing is that I see myself as a coach as the person who has to create an environment that allows them to be successful. So the players want to be successful. They put in a lot of effort. It's all self-funded, and they have to do fitness tests and those kind of things as well. But my job is to create an environment that allows them to be successful, both individually and as a team. And that starts with selection. So one of the critical parts for me is making sure that I select the right people. So not just the hockey players, but the people as well. The last thing you want to do is have to go away for a World Cup for 2 weeks and spend it with somebody who doesn't quite pull in the same direction as the others in the team. So that culture piece is really important, and that starts to be developed once the team comes together. The other part of that, and it's kind of part of the second part of it, still room for growth. I get people who've come from varied kind of backgrounds and experiences in hockey. So some of them have played since they were 5, some of them have picked up the game a bit later on, some of them have had a break to have children and come back. But it's really important for me as a coach that there's some learning that happens. And so I have a word in my head which is amplify. And what that means to me is that the experience that when they come together as a team and when they leave at the end of whatever it is that they're going, have been doing, that they've amplified, whether it's amplified what they know about themselves, what they know about the game, kind of amplified their love for the game, amplified in terms of what they've learned about the game. So there's a real learning process there. And if a player comes to me at the end of a campaign and says, hey, I really learned a lot, I feel really good about that, regardless of whether they've come first, second or last. I think that my job, because a lot of the players come with a lot of experience, some of them have been coaches, some of them are captains of teams, my job then is to facilitate. So while I like to chuck new things at them to challenge them and keep their learning fresh, I also work in a very collaborative way, because there's a heck of a lot of IP that comes with the group. And so trying to tap into that to ensure that that actually adds value to what the team does. So it's a real collective effort in terms of the performance, even down to the extent where we'll look at drills and things that they're doing, and I'll stop them and ask them, is this working for you? Can we change it? Where have you seen this done differently? How can we make it more effective? Those kind of things. I think the other thing, even when I was coaching, I've coached through the age ranges, and even at under 18 level, and it's the same with coaching masters hockey. The fact that people have a good experience and they come back next year is one of the ways in which I look at how successful I am as a coach. So yes, there's results and there's trophies and they're really nice to win, but if somebody has such a good experience and they want to do it again next year, that's also something that is kind of part of what's important to me when I'm doing the coaching. It's really interesting because when you look at 18-year-olds versus 50-plus-year-olds, which is what I've got this year, there are a whole lot of different types of things that parts of running a team, in particular a campaign, that are different. Probably 50-year-olds are much better at expressing opinions about things than 18-year-olds. So you've got to take those on board. I have different conversations with them, and they're at different life stages, obviously, so there's that ongoing learning for me to understand where each of them is at, so that I can kind of tap into them and get the best out of them if I can. And also, one of the other things that I've been very deliberate about in terms of my approach, hockey in the 80s, I think it was 84, thereabouts, it used to be a women's association, National Women's, National Men's Association, and they came together as Hockey New Zealand. And written into the constitution at that stage was around the importance of equity, so making sure that in things like board appointments that there was equity in terms of number of women, number of men. And for a long time it's been seen as a relatively kind of equitable code. At some levels it's true, at other levels it probably needs a little bit of work still, but it's also seen as a very white sport, if you like, in that sense. So one of the approaches that I've started to take in the last couple of years, and particularly this year, going into a World Cup, because we're representing New Zealand on that particular stage, is around the introduction of some Te Ao Māori concepts, and doing that in a way that is meaningful rather than tokenistic. So something that's kind of integrated into the way in which we operate as a team. And so that's been a really interesting part of the process as well, in terms of, you know, making some change and introducing new things, and yeah. I think it's
Kristen, so you've spoken about co-founding PowerSoup. So it's a business focused on tackling the gender leadership gap. And what have you found are the strengths and values that Wāhine help make them great leaders?
Some of these will feel, they will be obvious, but they're backed up by lots of studies and research, of course. The other thing is, actually I'll get to that in a sec, but the first is empathy and social sensitivity. Now there are some obvious signs that we've been socialized to be more nurturing and caring. It doesn't come naturally to everyone, women, the minute they're born, but nonetheless, we do have very strong empathy and social sensitivity. And what that means is, in terms of, I'll just take publicly listed businesses and how we can draw parallels to great leadership. If you were to take a look at all of the publicly listed companies that are on the share markets at the moment around the world, and you were to take out those that are run by women, they will have outperformed on every business metric compared to those companies run by men. Now, we love men, our men. However, they have been socialized to embody a very particular leadership style. And we know that because with the products that we use have all been built by men for men. And they have had to conform to a leadership style and sacrifice possibly some of the values that are inherent in them and some of these incredible traits. So for women, we have them naturally. And what it means is when we run teams, when we run businesses, and we don't act like men, that we act like ourselves, and we use our strengths and our inherent traits, is that we have higher profits. We tend to care for our communities a little bit more. Therefore, when we make decisions in businesses and in organizations, we're taking into account a number of stakeholders, like the impact on community, impact on environment, and impact on sustainability and long-term growth. And if we look at a number of crises over the past, human history, often women aren't at the forefront of some of the decision making, the outcomes of these crises, but it's so interesting to see that sometimes in crises, women are put at the helm of businesses to have a safe pair of hands and steer them clear. So this is where this empathy and social sensitivity comes in, this ability to care for things other than just, singular profit. And therefore customer satisfaction goes up. People love brands that are for more, especially nowadays, that are for more than just profit at the expense of XYZ. Employees tend to be more engaged because women are really sensitive to policies that ultimately support diversity in a workplace, be it parental leave, be it, I could go on. They're all very obvious. There's something else that is related to authenticity, and that is because women have historically been excluded. We've had to navigate kind of our own path, and we can't emulate this kind of typical leadership style that has built, some of the world's most successful businesses. We've had time to tap into our strengths and our superpowers, and we tend to use those to navigate the workplace. And ultimately, that means we can show up when it's a safe place. We can show up as ourselves and use our strengths. We don't have to show up acting like someone else, and that's incredibly powerful. And people want to be around people that are authentic. Customers want to buy from businesses that have leaders that are authentic. Teams will stay and they're more engaged when you actually don't, if you're quiet, but yet some of your strengths are, and there's so many great strengths tests out there. if you're leveraging those, be it in delivery or timekeeping or coaching, you're flexing those every day, you effectively are bringing your value to work, and people want to be around that. So we've got some incredible traits as women in the workplace. Inclusive leadership is probably one of the most needed and most powerful leadership skills that every human on this planet can have today. We've had it already for a long, long time, women, inclusive leadership. We've had to, because again, we've been excluded. We're far more sensitive to those that have been marginalized around us, and we're incredible active listeners. We have low ego, high curiosity, and therefore we are inclusive leaders, kind of by default. Not all of us, I get it, but it comes more naturally to us. And for the men and the male allies in the room, it is one of the most powerful skills you can and should learn over the course of the next few years, is exactly what does inclusive leadership, who am I, and what does that mean for me as I lead.
And it's such a good point. The point you're making is women might have had to have adopted this, but men have potentially adopted it with their behaviours because of what they've been created to lead in, strong and aggression. So they're called out to be authentic.
Yeah.
Whether you're male or female or whoever you identify as, it's just simply be yourself.
Yeah, I've heard, just quickly on that, I heard someone say last week that in the world that we inhabit at the moment, in the structures that we live in, men's shame comes from when they perceive to exhibit weakness, and women's shame come when we perceive to exhibit or we're not perfect. So this real sense of perfection and us needing to be perfect, and for men it's weakness, which lends to a leadership style that we've seen.
Yeah. That's very cool. But I don't think I have that perception so much about males in leadership and the reason why they are that way.
Oh, and some of the best, leaders in the world genuinely are men, but we need both.
So one little tip from your website, you've spoken about 80% of your clients experience an increase in motivation and engagement at work. It would just be cool, right? How is that? How are you doing it so successfully?
Yeah, we take, I don't want to say a tech approach, because it's actually not a tech approach. It's a behavioral science approach. But the tech community has adopted behavioral science. If you haven't noticed how many times you check your phone and all of the endorphins that go off, the dopamine hits, like they control us because they've nailed behavioral science. And so certainly not a tech community thing. But what we learned with our last company is, which was investing, is that there's so much baggage and emotional wrapped up with going from being a non-investor, which at the time when we started, 80% of Kiwi were not investors. And so there's, for a ton of reasons, like don't invest money if you want to lose it all, the stock market crash of '89 here, like all sorts of stuff, invest in property, And so, and then not to mention, like, I'm not good with money, it's not for me, it feels so hard. And so we had to look at how to change people's behavior and belief and perceptions of themselves to turn them from non-investors to investors. And so we spent 5 years doing that. And the way you do it is exactly the way you do it in sport. And athletes have known this for, eons, is that you have a big goal and you break it down into tiny actions, and then you break it down even to further actions, and then you just do that one small thing today. So if that's that training session, or if that's that meditation session, or if that's your rest day, that's the thing you do. And you just wake up the next day and you do it again. And so we did the same thing at our last company, is that is a really hard thing for some people to go from being a non-investor to actually investing in the share markets. So what is the smallest thing they need to do today? And then what's the smallest thing they need to do tomorrow? And so we built that into our app, and then you get those dopamine hits of, I've just done something, and before you know it, you've taken enough steps to kind of do that thing. So we've applied the same process with PowerSuit. We look to the likes of, if you look at fitness apps, if you look at well-being apps, what is a small daily practice that's habit forming that I wake up and do every single day? I feel good about myself, and I'm one step closer to whatever my goal might be. Same with professional development. Why we send people on intensive 3-week courses, one day, whatever it is, when we kind of come back into the workforce that hasn't changed, and that was really great and inspiring, but then we don't practice it because we haven't got into the habit of doing that thing. So Powersuit, we're like, take 15 minutes a week. Like, that's what investing in yourself should be. That's what development should be. Take 15 minutes a week and we'll take care of the rest. And so we take anything, whatever your goal is, and we break it down into one small action, be it a master class, be it whatever, an action that we've got on the platform. And you do that thing and you're one step closer to whatever your goal is. So it's just makes something that's really big and hard, professional development, leadership development, and turns it into a weekly practice, which is behavioral science. So that's what we've done there.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that little tip for the crew. Increase the motivation.
Yeah, all sorts of hacks. Habit stacking, have you heard of this? Yeah. Well, for those who haven't, you've all nodded, but for those who haven't, because then they're like, but I haven't. You just like take a habit that you do every day, brushing your teeth, like you know how you get your morning coffee or whatever you do, and just add the one healthy thing next to it. Like if it's your morning coffee, just have your, I don't know, if you do the meditation, add that. Or if it's brushing your teeth, you could like wash something that you've been meaning to wash for ages. Or if it's you have your shoes at the door in order that's stacked on top of it, needing to get the dog out for a walk or something like that, or your running shoes. Yeah, so anyway, I digress.
Thank you very much, Kristen. That was awesome. So Josh, what was the reason you decided to join women and girls groups?
Before I answer that question, I want to just pay tribute to my Mount Rushmore of Wāhine in my life that have contributed to my journey. So first of all, being me ma, and she worked 60 hours a week, single parent, and she raised me to value hard work, and so just want to honour her. Maddie Sinclair Nicky Sherriff, so she is the founder of a girls charity down in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, called Ford Foundation, and she taught me that the best ability that you can have is availability, and she contributed to that journey as well of being invited into that space to support young females in sport and recreation. Number 3 is Whitney Hanson, who taught me if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And then the 4th person is Nicky Sherriff, who worked for a regional sports trust called Sport Canterbury a couple of years ago, and she taught me the value of if you want to make change, you can't look in, you've got to look up and out. And so thinking of those last 2 in particular, so not being the smartest person in the room and looking up and out, I suppose those were my motivations and opportunities to be involved in women and girls groups through my previous employer, as well as Women in Sport Waitaha down in Ōtautahi. And I guess the first point of call was I was never, I suppose similar to Fusi, where I was never looking to actively support women and girls initiatives. I was invited into those spaces based on the relationships that I was privileged and lucky enough to create throughout my life. And those, obviously my mum's a mum, but those other 3 women were really integral in inviting me into those spaces to not be the smartest person in the room. So they helped me to practice that active listening, that gave me that learning approach, that curiosity, and then Nicky's advice around looking up and out. That's where I really learned the value of, or if we're going to influence or impact a system, we need to look at the levers of change. And an example from women and girls group in my previous workplace, we looked at our organisation and we looked at, okay, so what are some significant levers that we can influence as a women and girls group? And one of those levers was policies. So looking at the policies within our organisation that we did and we didn't have, two of those being, one that we had was parental leave policy, which you have to have under legislation, and most organisations, well, I can't say most, but there's a lot of organisations that will just use that legislation line, that one line under parental leave as your parental leave entitlement. So that was one of our projects to tweak that lever to help those undergoing parental leave understand what they were actually entitled to, as well as educate managers and the organisation around what are the best practice guidelines to actually supporting women and other individuals who are undergoing parental leave. And the other one was the introduction of a menstruation and menopause policy into the organisation where it did not exist before. And again, thinking back to that, not being the smartest person in the room and being curious and learning, that was absolutely, I'll put my hand up, I'll write the notes for this meeting. You talk at me. And that was a huge learning for me. The other levers of change that we focused around were power dynamics. So looking at our as an organisation, we were able to influence our senior leaders to undergo gender pay gap analysis, and which actually highlighted to us as a women and girls group that our organisation is actually taking steps to be equitable with how they remunerate women within the organisation, and that actually shifted our mental models from thinking that the organisation wasn't doing enough in that space. But speaking of mental models, then some of you may have heard of a project that came out a couple of years ago called Project Pink Dot. And so as a women and girls working group, we thought, okay, how are we going to shift the mental models of those who are on that sort of middle carriage of the train? And by train, I mean at one end, at the top end, you've got those who are on board and willing to be champions and advocate for and be a part and support you. Those at the other end of the train are those who are apathetic and are probably never going to join your cause. And then there's this middle carriage where there's a group of people, or there's a number of people who could sway either way, and so the bottom or the top carriage. And it was how do we get more people from that middle carriage into that championing and supporting of women and girls in the workplace. And that was through the Project Pink Dot, where we thought, okay, it's probably not a great idea to highlight to people how biased they are and create, maybe push them towards that other carriage, being defensive. It was more around highlighting the physical environment and identifying things like, you mentioned phones. So phones were created by men for men. We discovered that door handles were the same, CPR dummies, they were the same, and seat belts tested on males. All these little things, and the idea of the Pink Dot project, or Project Pink Dot, was to sort of guerrilla marketing, where you put a pink dot on every part of the physical environment that had a gender bias or unconscious bias towards it, and that created discussion. And then in the second week, what we did is we started explaining a couple of things. So we might put a post-it note on one of the door handles, or the CPR dummy might have a note on it, just explaining why that pink dot was there, which then culminated in the third week around let's get together, have a morning tea, and we'll explain to you what these guerrilla marketing dots are all about. So I guess to sort of summarise that little waffle is that what I learned is that in order to create change, today, we have to be thinking about tomorrow. And the best way we can do that is by looking at the parts of the system that we can put a crowbar underneath, and then start to jimmy, and then hopefully shift, like those, was it the policies, like the power dynamics, and like those mental models. So I was lucky enough to have a group of 14 amazing Wāhine around me to help me learn and grow and educate myself, and practice empathy and be curious, and see. Unfortunately, I wasn't there to see all of the impacts that happened from those projects, but I was there to see the passion and the commitment of the individuals in the group, as well as start to see some of those mental models shift. And that's something that is really great. I'm glad that I was a part of.
There's some really cool examples that, like, anytime consumed, they just need some people to move forward and apply those. So there's some really cool examples, and PickDot is actually also on the Whisper website on their Insights Hub now, so you can check it out, and it's got all the korero behind it, and how to deliver it. So check it out there and start putting pink dots around your organisation. I'm really curious of time, and I'm really keen to be able to enable the group to ask more questions than me ask more questions. So I'm just going to ask one more before I put to the room, just so it's not just me taking up all the time. But we've covered it a little bit today, talking about male allyship. We've obviously got 2 males on the panel talking about Wāhine, and also really grateful for the males in the room and the Tani in the room turning up, because this traditionally would be attracting females and women, and I think to make those change and get that crowbar in, it's really important to have everyone in this room. So big mihi to everyone turning up. But my last question is around, like, what does male allyship mean to you guys? And this anyone can chip in, and you don't have to if you don't want to. And what are some really great examples you've seen of it?
I'm a mum of a daughter and a son, so this is like a social experiment. That's okay, because I was a twin and I was a social experiment with my feminist mother as well. We were both, she was like, Kristen, play with the trucks, Mike with the doll. Anyway, so it's so interesting that male allyship, women for the past, well, certainly my generation, not my mom's generation, possibly one, I'm Gen X, is that we've been told that for the first time in history we can do anything. Like, we can. I could go to school and I could do anything. However, which is amazing, women are facing burnout, all-time highs, right? We're leaving the workforce, there's pipeline issues, we're checking out, like, forget it. Who wants that job anyway? Because at the same time my mum was telling me that, she wasn't telling my brother they have to step up and do all the stuff at home or with family or with children. And so that is my social experiment at home. I'm like, we'll just see how this goes. Because there will be still so many messages my son gets, particularly in New Zealand, why we have like girls' schools, boys' schools, I don't know. Sorry if you're into that, but I'm just like, he is still surrounded by boys all day. I don't know what messaging he's hearing, but I can only do what I can do at home. But there's something there. So allyship is actually recognizing that it's not just in the workplace. There's like a whole world out there that, you know, women can do everything, but men can too in other arenas outside of work. So there's that. And then just 2 things on being a male ally, and then I'll stop. The first, I think, is men getting really comfortable with who they are, because again, they've been told messages of what it is to act like a man, what it is to be a boss, what it is. And so to break that down and get really comfortable with who they are, I think that is really powerful. To be comfortable in yourself, where you've come from, your whakapapa, your skin color, your power, your privilege, getting really comfortable and just sitting in that. And then the second is one of the most powerful things that male allies can do in the workplace is intervention, and little tiny things, like tiny things in meetings, like let's just let so-and-so finish her point. Oh, I'm gonna attribute, there's this whole, Obama did this, attributed the idea to the person who was the woman in the room. Oh, well, actually that was Kim's idea. So thank you so much for that great idea. So intervention, those little micro, you see on TikTok, like micro-feminism, like male allyship it can involve something as simple as that as well.
Yeah, you see a lot of those memes about the women actually discovered this, and it's all those historical moments in life that you thought were males, but actually there was a strong wāhine behind a lot of the kaupapa. Anybody else?
It's a good segue into how I feel about it, because it's an opportunity for us to challenge the male as a male around how they perceive the existence of our women and our girls in our environments. And it's a great example. You know, you're in the boardroom or the meeting room, and there's a conversation, and a male talks about something, and all of a sudden it's a great idea. But the female had actually mentioned it about half an hour ago. You know, but being able to be able to state the obvious, like you're not listening to what she said. You know, that to me, the vulnerability factor. If you're a male and you show that vulnerability, you're actually creating the opportunity for women to display what are really the true values and strengths that they have. Women are very empathetic. Women are very driven by emotion and feeling, you know. And if you're a male and you can show that you have weaknesses and you have moments when you need their support, it's amazing how much more they come out and they want to be a part of what you've created around strengthening them and empowering them. So it's more than just sponsorship or advocacy. It's actually being in those moments when women deserve the opportunity, but actually telling the males to be quiet, shut up, sit down and listen, and pay attention, because you could actually learn something today.
It doesn't work when I say it.
I think it'll work out.
I think it's a really important thing for us to be kind of promoting, because still in a lot of sport, the decision makers and the holders of positions are men, and where there are, you know, men and women who participate in codes, and so some of the decision making has a natural bias towards what's good for men rather than what's best for everybody. So that's where I see potentially the need for more allyship is in some of those decision-making positions, particularly in the management of sport. And that's not just nationally, that's regionally as well. It kind of connects with what we were talking about before in terms of the CEO experience and that sort of stuff as well. So I think there's a gap there, but it's very important. And even if you had a look at the coaching stats up there that are on the wall, and understanding that we've got this way of doing coaching, but actually for women, and it ties into what we're talking about, different leadership styles for women and men, and understanding how that might play out in a coach development situation. And so in a very practical sense, it's a really important aspect of the management of sport in that sense.
Oh geez, it's pretty hard to to follow up that korero. I guess I don't even know if this answers the question, but there was a story that I was told by a friend who was told by his neighbour, who's a sports coach. And, he's got two children. He's got two children under that aren't at school yet. One's a little boy and one's a little girl, and he noticed that when his son would fall over or fall off his skateboard or whatever it might be, he would have this sort of mentality or instinct to sort of look at him and go, "Oh, come on, get up, harden up," that sort of mentality. And then when his daughter would do the same, she would fall over or fall off her skateboard, his mindset was to rush to her and to support her and care for her. And I guess where I'm going with that is that in that moment, or at some point in time, after maybe a few of those moments, he realised he is treating his son differently to how he's treating his daughter. And I guess where I'm going with that is males will never know inequity or inequality truly unless it happened to them. So I guess what's happening right now, the narratives that are coming out, the increased media and social media, and it's all storytelling to help males, again, they'll never understand, but they might one day have that moment where they go, okay, something's not right here, something needs to change, and the only person that I can control is myself. And then the other side of that is, if there is stuff happening, it needs to be called out. And in terms of male allyship, it's potentially more powerful, potentially more powerful coming from another male.
Yeah.
And that's male allyship, because then there's no, they can't attribute that situation to gender, because it's their own, it's themselves talking to themselves. So yeah, my 2 cents.
Okay. That's awesome, team. We are a little bit behind time. We'll have probably just a couple of questions, but also after this there is some time to have a call, if you want to catch someone. So I guess I don't really know how to do it. Does anyone have a question?
Okay, I'm going to first say the fact, which is proven, and then I'm going to ask a question of all of you. So the fact is, and I studied it at university, so what I'm uncomfortable with is that we are talking about men leadership styles, female, and they are more empathetic, and I'm going to go, no! I have worked, as probably all of you have, with some of the most cold-hearted women leaders. So what I want to plant, the seed, is to say how I see it is that there's feminine leadership that men can have, and then there's masculine leadership. So the logic and the strategy. So we've got a fire. The fireman's got to be masculine, direct strategy. Just do it. And then nice feminine leadership comes in afterwards to console the burnt people and help them. So my question to Fusi and Kristen mainly, also Nicky and Josh, is how much does agility, so understanding the situation and when you need masculine leadership versus feminine, how much does agility come into coaching, regardless of whether it's men or women, and how do you bring that about, if it is?
I'll give you some time. I think sometimes that separation of female-male leadership styles is arbitrary because you've got an individual and a personality. And so that plays into it as well. But there are some traits around the way in which women lead that are different and sometimes more effective than how men traditionally kind of lead. But I would say that leadership is situational, so you have to adopt different leadership styles depending on the situation that you're in. So there are times where you have to be that empathetic, that person who hears what that person is saying and responds to that. There are other times where you have to be autocratic and tell it like it is, and it's because the situation demands that of you. So I think there is that you need to have that agility, and I don't think there's just one style or another, although some people do have preferences in the way that they like to lead. So I think it's, if you're going to lead, there's a range of styles that you need to adopt, and you've got to be able to apply the right one in the right situation.
I would just support that, agree with everything there, rather than the crudely separating it by gender. It's, I don't know if anyone's done Clifton Strengths, but you get your top 5 strengths, and they're only, I heard a lot of mm-hms, for those who haven't, there is 1 in 33 million, you are one, whatever, you know what I mean. No one, 33 million other people do not have your same strengths. I'm terrible with stuff like this. Like, what time is it? Plus, the whole perimenopause thing, but you are so uniquely you, and if you start to embody those strengths that are innate to you, forget the weaknesses, and you bring those in your leadership style, male, female, doesn't matter. You are uniquely you. You can show up as you. There will be some things that need to be learned for situational things, but I think for the sake of this discussion, it was probably easy just to say historically, we've been socialized to be nurturing, to be collaborative, and that's been a really great leadership trait. The only thing I would point out, because you are true, and that some of women are the worst managers, I would just like to point out, for the benefit of what women have been through, those that have had to trailblaze and those that have had to break glass ceilings, they've had to be brutal. And the only modeling that they have had is brutal. And so unfortunately, when they look back down and they're like, man, they got it too easy, that is a really tough place to be as a woman who's had to sacrifice everything, doesn't know her children, with XYZ, her health, her mental well-being, and then has to go, all these things in place now for this next generation. That is a tough place to be as a human being. So just benefit of the doubt that those are glass ceiling breakers that have had to act in a very different way than we can act today, in my opinion. But I appreciate your insight.
It's a great question. Agility is it's something that is practiced, and it's something that you continue to explore how you impact. So you might have a particular intention, but if your intention is not the impact, it's then being able to have the artillery or the repertoire to be able to support how you would then manage that particular situation. When you're working in an environment with multiple participants, they've all got different motivations, they've all got different needs. Some prefer a particular style. So being able to read the room for a standard need for the whole group is great, but being able to take it to another level and take it down a level to make it individualized, because they're all very different, right? Some people like the kick in the pants to get them going, some like the hand on the back approach. It's very much knowing that you've got a good working knowledge of the way to be able to deal with every particular need that is in the room. But the real reason for the cause and the setup of your values, your behaviours, standards that are aligned to a particular objective that you're trying to gain is something that you create through the creation of a culture where everybody understands that, but at the same time they can be individual, but they understand how their individualism folds into how we all get something collectively. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, but we don't have to agree wholly on how we get there. We'll get there, but we can still contribute in our own ways and be expressive in the way that we wish to.
That's why it's rooted.
Nailed it.
Made a couple notes so I don't forget and so I could listen to everything. First of all, it was really interesting, Josh and Fusi, to hear that you've been invited into those spaces. I think as females, we quite often almost need to get shoulder tapped at times to go for opportunities, and it sort of made me think maybe we as females need to do some shoulder tapping ourselves to get more male allies. Nicky, a question around leadership.
Yes.
You said that you very much look in terms of an inclusive leadership sort of style. Sort of thinking like I work within football. In recent years, our top women's team have made the news sometimes for the wrong reasons. Quite often around the leadership, we had Haraf come in, national coach, and essentially the players had a groundswell of sort of saying he's not right for us, as did New Zealand at the time. And so he sort of went, but what I saw in that was that there was a lot of power within the playing group, and I wonder how you sort of approach that in terms of having an inclusive leadership style, but also, I guess, having that power balance of that there's not too much with the playing group, because I wonder if we're seeing that again
in the current status. Like, I'm not sure if you know about the national coach of the football Ferns didn't go on the recent tour, and that was the tour before the Olympics. And that was an employment investigation. Apparently it's all now solved, and she's back in charge. And I just wonder if that balance has gone too far that way, and how you might look at that.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, and I have a conversation early on with the team when we talk about what leadership looks like within the group, and we follow the defence model actually around that actually the most critical part of leadership is self-leadership, and what does that look like when it shows up in the team, and creating, sort of setting up sort of steps and processes that allow for, if there's an issue, that it can either come directly to me or it can come via the channels that we set up. So in hockey, similar to football I guess in a way, I create pods. So there's strikers, midfielders, defenders, and there's a pod leader, and so there's a conduit, there's a manager, so that if there are issues, that they can be brought through that process, either directly with me. Sometimes I must be really scary because they don't come to me directly. But it is a system that works, and it just kind of, so it's not kind of too hierarchical, because I think that's when you start to get some of the issues. You have to have hierarchies in organisations, but you don't necessarily need the hierarchical behaviour that goes with it. And so in a team there's always a hierarchy, but understanding how that works and how that creates value for everybody is. So it is a very deliberate conversation that I have, and I've got little pictures that I give them, and so it reminds them of it and bits and pieces. But put a lot of emphasis around self-leadership in the first instance, and what that means and what that looks like when it shows up. Yeah, so really important part of the process. But the buck stops with me as well, so.
Right, so we'll probably clear up there, but if there is any more questions, please just catch the team. I'm sure they'll be open to. But it's not the end of the evening, so you can still stay around. There's obviously kai and ino out on the tables, but also on some of the tables there are some little initiatives. So we have Kimberly. There she is. She's done an awesome initiative and program that can be explained on the table, so you can always have a corridor with her. And also there's been some insights with the voice coach that Nicky did talk to, which Graham is around as well, which was a part of that. So dive on and have a chat and ask them some questions if you've got any more about it. Also, so before we finish this part, it's just an opportunity to thank Madison. So Madison Recruitment for hosting us here today.
Thank you.
And also for the sponsorship of the kai and drinks as well. So we really appreciate that, and the venue is beautiful. It's just a little bit nicer than Nakota. So we appreciate you guys being able to come to a little bit of a level up with a good view. And panel, just really appreciate your time. You're away from Whānau to come to this. This isn't work hours. We haven't paid them to do this, but this is off their own back. So we really appreciate that in sharing your stories, and no doubt you are going to be going off and doing some even more wonderful things. So please do stay in touch, and these events will happen throughout the year, so please do come along again. But just to everyone else, thank you. Have an awesome Matariki weekend, remembering those who have passed, celebrating the present right now with our whānau, but also looking towards for the future that we have in the next year ahead of us. Manawatia Matariki. So to close up formalities, we'll just do a karakia to close, but please do stay on, have a cordial and have some kai. And for those of you that know, please also do join in. So unahia, so uri Ke wātia, ke māma, te ngā kau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ala tākata. Koia rai rongo, whakairia ake ki runga. Kia tīna, hongi huie,
Ai ki e.
Kia ora.